Okay, thank you everybody. I'm going to speak briefly first, and then I'm going to move to Councillor Lee's amendment, and then if there are questions on that amendment, that's fine. If there are none, he can start his debate on that. Right, I think everyone's here, so I've moved and the Mayor has seconded. So essentially, we're here after 5 long years so far of a process that has felt long and stressful, sometimes confusing, especially when often you're the one explaining it to many people. But I guess where we are today, I think we're outside of what was very unpopular Plan Change 78 with the MDRS that was spread like Marmite right across the city, I guess you could say, affecting nearly every parcel of land across the city. We then had the floods. Myself and the Mayor wrote to the government to stop the process. Thankfully, they allowed us to stop that process because we were very concerned about the areas of land that were hit really hard being intensified and what that actually meant for the city at the time. It did take a long time, but the government did change the law, this government, and allowed us to change that density. Obviously, keeping the same capacity then meant that we did have to fit that same 2 million figure, whether it was, we know that was an accident, that number, but it happened to be 2 million. But the good thing was we got the strongest change to hazards and building and floodplains that we've ever had in this city. So that was a really good step forward. Obviously, because of the 2 million figure, there was a whole lot more density in places that sometimes didn't make sense, sometimes was just put there to make up the numbers and did upset a lot of people. Other people were probably quite happy at some of that density as well. Obviously, then there was a move again to reduce that figure, and we got confirmation of that this year, despite going out to the public with that 2 million Plan Change 120. Now, thankfully, we have a process and a plan that looks far clearer, more aligned with the infrastructure we do have, especially transport, water care infrastructure. Remember that water care, even now, have the ability to refuse development no matter where it is if there isn't the infrastructure now. So it is not always going to align, but it aligns far better than, say, Plan Change 120 and definitely better than Plan Change 78. I appreciate the local boards and iwi authorities have given really clear feedback. I think the staff have done their level best to try and change it where it makes sense. In the time frame, the 2 weeks they had to change it, some of that was around moving all those local centres because most boards, especially those in the outer areas who wanted A, the simple change of removing the local centres essentially made them A. I think every local board who asked for A is now A, apart from Puketipapa, which has the local centres removed. There's a little bit of bus corridor left in there, and Orake is mentioned here, but they actually gave quite a nuanced feedback between A and B and kind of got that as well. Obviously, the town centres, the train stations, the bus stations, and the walkable catchment around the city centre has stayed as the plan. A, to reach over 1.4 million, but it's the clear thing to do in the NPSUD. Everything from now will still be consulted on. We're still going to go again to the poor public, who are probably sick of doing this, but they will have that opportunity, that 4-week process, to be able to look over the changes that many people might decide not to actually do a submission anymore and withdraw their submission. Others might be grumpy that the density's gone down in their street or their property. Others will be happy to see there's further moves on hazards and flooding. It's quite a lot of work that's been done in that 6-month period to increase the amount of downzoning in those hazard zones. Once again, people will love that, other people won't like that. So we want that feedback, that clear feedback from people. We also want feedback from people if they think a walkable catchment is slightly in the wrong place, where it should be, why it should be stretched out. We just don't have the time to do all that work right now, but the public can do that. Then the public and local boards will have the opportunity to speak to the panel, give really clear, concise feedback on what they do and don't want in their area, what they might want to comment on other areas too. That is still going to be a possibility over the next, however, year, basically, for the public and the local boards and iwi authorities and anyone else to have a say on that feedback. So there was a lot of really fine-grained feedback that just wasn't able to be addressed through this, but also staff had to give a regional approach to issues. There may be a bus route that has quite a lot of buses that they couldn't support removing for when other bus routes with far less buses are kept in. So I think we are moving to a place which makes more sense, will be less scary for the public who don't like density. But as we've seen with the fast tracks, as we've seen with these private plan changes happening all around the city, that the focus has been putting housing in areas where there's absolutely no infrastructure. The fact is this process does represent a lot more of what we've said, and it will mean that younger people may have an opportunity to live and buy or rent a home closer to transport, jobs, education, and libraries and things that we all love. It might give an opportunity for people to downsize from their family property, to live within the community they've lived their whole lives, or brought up their family if they have children. That will give more opportunities for that to happen. No, it won't lower the prices of everyone's home overnight, but it will help to bring more opportunities for people to live here. We know that people are going to live here. Before the unitary plan, your population was pretty flat, and then with about 4 years, we had 400,000 more people come live here in a 4-year period. That will likely happen again at some point, and I think this is a better plan to show that. So I hope today we can move forward. It's been 5 years. If we can just move forward, put this out there. If we don't, 2 million will stay. The legislation is very clear. We have an opportunity to reduce density, but the current plan is in place, and we'll keep going with the panel, and it will be approved in some form next year. So I really hope that today we can move forward with the changes so the public can have their say. The government has 23 days left of sitting. They are not going to be rewriting laws again in that time, so we will probably stick with the same plan. Thank you all for this. I know it's been tough, but we will now move to Councillor Lee's amendment, and just want to hope that we can have a positive conversation around this table about the issues, not each other, and I'll appreciate if that can stay that way. Kia ora. Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much. I was psyched up to move this amendment around about 11 o'clock this morning, but I should know better. First of all, I want to apologise to the Haukura members. The last job I did last night was to sit down next to the agenda and go through my email and email all the councillors and the Haukura members. Unfortunately, I went through the Budget and Performance Committee agenda and I sent it to the wrong members, so my apologies on that. Okay, this is not an amendment to withdraw part of the plan change, as the substantive recommended motion is. It's merely to pause it, and for very good reason. The reason being is that, first of all, just as Plan Change 78, the Chair has conceded, was extremely unpopular, this plan change is also unpopular, in particular in the areas in which it applies. And the area I represent is one of those. And so the government will be writing law changes, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, and it's a profound change, according to the Minister, of resource management law, the biggest change since 1991. And so, given the philosophy that the Minister proposes is substantially different from the sustainable management philosophy, sustainability principle embodied in RMA, plans will have to be aligned with it. Also, as has been mentioned this afternoon, the unitary plan, which is an RMA document, will have to be reviewed regardless, I understand, of the parent legislation, but it will have to be aligned with that legislation, and that is why it is sensible, given how confused and complex this process has been, not helped because it was rushed, streamlined. It's taken longer to do this plan change, and its predecessor, 78, as the chair has mentioned, than it did to do the whole unitary plan in terms of years. I think unitary plan was more or less 4 years. This has already taken 5. This process won't be completed until October next year, and no sooner would this process be completed, then we would have to start working all over again. It would make a lot of sense given the election and given this plan is very much the personal creature of the Minister for Housing and lots of other things, resource management, whatever, to pause this right now and to put people out of their agony, because a lot of people are extremely adversely affected. The only numerate data I have seen interpreting the submissions which were called for before Christmas last year would indicate major opposition to the plan change as it went out. 64.8%, 6,840 submissions opposed, 3,048 submissions please amend, and 614 submissions saying, great, we support it. So regardless, the key aspects in the plan are still strongly opposed. I talked about special character areas and the fact that 2/3 of historic St Mary's Bay is up for the special character areas will have their protection, their special status removed, and therefore they'll be up for destruction to make way for 15-storey high-rises. I said 2/3, I was wrong. It's 80% of St Mary's Bay is targeted for destruction. In terms of walkable catchments, is this really about public transport? Because walkable catchments are a very sensible, sound measure, a planning tool pioneered by the great planner Jan Gell, I think he's Belgian, to optimise patronage for public transport services. What is the right size of the catchment to match the services provided? And 800 metres over level ground is the standard, the international standard. Our planners, for whatever reason, when it comes to the inner city, St Mary's Bay, Parnell, have gone for a 50% increase in that walkable catchment length, but not on level ground, probably the most hilly part of, or one of the most hilly parts of Auckland. And so that is unacceptable. The question has to be asked, are we doing this to open up commercially attractive sites overlooking the harbour for the real estate sector in response to pressure from big property, or are we really doing it for public transport? I think not the latter. And given the Northwest Busway, rapid transit has no intensification whatsoever ever planned in this plan, and that's obviously events catching up with the planning. It's another good reason to pause things until we can consider that as well. I have to say, Mr. Chair, that the other matter too, the other offending matter is the 10-kilometre circle. It makes no sense whatsoever under the Resource Management Act to come up with a measure such as that. As staff have admitted, there's no Section 32 analysis to back that up. It's purely subjective, and again, it seems to relate to, let's be honest about it, harbour views. Wherever the harbour views are good, that is the commercially attractive area. At the other side of this plan, if you like, is the high rise around railway stations. Now, we had a confidential meeting this morning that related to a certain development. I can talk about this particular development because it's been covered in the media, and that is a Symphony development which proposes high-rise apartments over a rail station. Probably the most busiest station, hopefully very soon, in the Auckland region, and that is the Waihorichu station. They can't get one buyer. And so how credible is the 15-storey around the minister's 15-storey buildings along the Western Line, what he called the CRL stations, how commercially viable that is a question. But there's no doubt at all that what is commercially desirable for not for young first home buyers, not for low income people, but for rich people, high rise luxury apartments, that's where the money is. And I'm afraid there's a lot of lobbying going on at central and local government by those interests to get their way in regard to breaking open those historic parts of Auckland and wrecking them essentially. So that is the reason why I think that we should pause this planning process now, wait until the new legislation comes through, wait until it's timed with the review of the unitary plan, or whatever it will be called under this new legislation, and without wasting or rejecting any of the work that's been done, put that to one side and use it to prepare for the plan changes that will be required in 2027. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor Lee. Now, are there any questions of Councillor Lee or staff on the amendment, or would you like to move to debate? Councillor Ferry.
Kia ora. I have a question of the mover, and then I have another question which I don't know if it's for the mover or for staff, but I'll ask. So, Councillor Lee, your amendment here is requesting that the Minister responsible for RMA reform and the Minister of Conservation change the timeframe from what it is now. What conversations have you had with either of them or with central government at all that indicate that they might do that?
Councillor Ferrier, I've had no conversations, at least of recent times, with either of those two gentlemen on this particular subject. All we're asking for here is to write to them, that the Chief Executive writes to them, to enable us to pause this process, which we are unable to do by ourselves because of the extremely prescriptive role that this minister in particular has taken upon himself to interfere in Auckland local government, town or urban planning.
Thank you for confirming that. And then my other question is to say, I'm not quite sure who's best placed to answer this, is what happens if the amendment passes, but then the ministers don't agree to change the timeframe?
The minister's going to look very bad before the election, I would say, Councillor Ferry, speaking from one politician to another, and so he should if he turns it down.
Through the chair, just from a staff perspective, my understanding would be is that at the moment we obviously have plan change 120 and we've been given the opportunity for council to make a decision as to whether or not they want to amend that, but otherwise the intention is that something keeps going. So if this was passed and we wrote a letter to the minister and the minister said no, then I think we would come back to you at a committee and say, that's what's happened. Now you have to make a decision. Do you want to amend it or not? So we kind of come back to today again.
But if he's, sorry, can I just clarify that? So we come back to today, but assumedly some weeks from now.
Yes, so, I mean, let's just say it's a couple of months from now, I'm just making a number up, that we've had the decision, we've contacted the minister has then come back to us, and if the minister says, no, I'm not going to pause it or change the time, then what we have is, we have Plan Change 120, which still has a time frame attached to it, so we either continue with that, or you make a decision to amend Plan Change 120, which you're being asked to today. So we will come back to you as a committee once we hear back from the minister. Yep.
And that would be without the time frame having been changed, though.
That's on the assumption of the, yes, if the minister says no. Yep.
I have been dealing with Minister Paul Tucker over a marine reserve proposal, and the last time I talked to Chris Bishop was over Auckland Rail. That was some years ago. I haven't been talking to them about this, but I have been talking to Aucklanders, and the overwhelming number of people who oppose the plan, that's what this amendment is about. We've heard from the local boards, we've heard from iwi, we heard from what we think, what the planners think. We haven't, the people who are not in the room are the people whom we are meant to represent. And this is to give voice to their concerns, and I think it's completely authentic, and I think it's a valid request to ask this minister, this government, and his colleague to pause the whole process because it's become a complicated mess that even this council itself has to withdraw aspects of it. That's the purpose of this amendment. I can't see it can do any harm whatsoever to ask the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Are there any other questions of Councillor Lee? No. Right. Is there anyone who would like to debate the amendment? No? Oh, Councillor Watson. Councillor Watson, I saw. Oh, Councillor Henderson then. Yeah. I'm not judging who's
I'll go.
or
I'm gonna take
the
like
beauty
20
of you both.
seconds.
You know,
Yeah, that's all
you're
good.
doing all right.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Yeah, now look, I'll come back to a lot of the themes discussed later around special character and harbour views and so forth. I'll just note that, as we've discussed before, encouraging supply has been shown to reduce house prices across the board. Even when you're talking about one development or so that isn't affordable per se, it makes the whole stock a bit more affordable because it shifts the demand around. But talk about that a bit later. Let me get to the amendment, and I've just got a couple of sentences on it. Look, I'm not going to support this today, and the reason is such. The process began nearly 5 years ago, 2021. Bipartisan legislation announcement. Both major parties getting out there and saying we need to increase housing supply. We're going to go 3 by 3 everywhere, MDRS, happy days. Since then, we've had years of watering down, U-turns, all kinds of things. We've gone lower and lower and lower, which is very disappointing, but it's landed us to today. It's been a long process, and we've seen hundreds of hours, thousands of hours. We've heard about the cost of all of this process. It's been huge. It's been in the millions. Apparently, that's under a rates cap now. We can't ask the government to cover the costs that they've incurred upon us, and would continue to incur as the process goes on longer and longer and longer than it needs to. So I've heard that the reasoning is to delay it is because some people don't like the outcomes. Well, they don't match for me. I just don't simply see a reason to delay the process any further. It's gone long enough. I think actually Aucklanders want certainty. They want us to bloody well get on with it, and especially the development community, because they want to know where they're actually allowed to build. So the earlier we can give them that certainty, the better. So I want certainty for Aucklanders. I'm not going to vote for it. Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, I think, in all honesty, if you're wanting certainty, you should be backing Councillor Lee's amendment there, because it does provide certainty. And why does it do that? Well, if we look at what's being requested here to amend the plan change directions to extend that 20-month period by an appropriate amount of time, will allow the transition to the new planning system under the planning bill. Now, there hasn't been much talk about what this planning bill actually involves. It's intended to replace the Resource Management Act as a principal statute governing land use, development, infrastructure and planning. And you will see that verb repeated over and over again, replace the RMA, not modify, not adapt, not update. They're going to replace the whole shooting match. And the government has described that the objective of this is making planning simpler, more certain, more supportive of economic growth. And with all due respect to a number of the people who are making comments here recently, we have seen what form that's taken with their fast-track legislation. We've seen that, haven't we? They're going to be trucking sewage out of new developments, new 1,200 dwelling developments up in Rodney and the Hibiscus Coast. So I think if we are to be wise and to take a proportionate risk, we should, in the first instance, acknowledge that if PC 120 is finalised under the RMA shortly before the new legislation commences, there is a very real risk that the policies adopted under the PC differ from the direction of the new legislation. Amendments could become necessary almost immediately, and councils could face conflicting implementation priorities. A pause, as Councillor Lee's suggesting, would reduce that risk. And there is legislative precedent for this, so he's not asking anything here that can't be done. Parliament has previously amended statutory timeframes where significant legislation reform is underway, and those sort of circumstances exist in this instance. An extension of the PC 120 timetable would therefore not be unprecedented. The request that he's going out with is limited. It's not to abolish, it's just to put it on hold. Temporary extension, preservation of the work already completed, resumption once a legislative framework is settled, and once we have some certainty, that certainty that Councillor Henderson was referring to, which does not exist now. We don't know what's going to be in that planning bill. You can take a guess. If you look at the fast-track legislation, it might be a bit of that in there, in which case a lot of the PC 120 work will be redundant, will be delivered redundant overnight. And what's the option? Well, the option, as we listen to some of our speakers, is to just continue this Benny Hill-like skit. Someone mentioned 4 years, 5 years. It's actually 6 years. And by my calculations, there's been 7 distinct changes along the way. In 2020, the NPSUD was gazetted, and that was their medium-density residential standards. Next, Plan Change 78, intensification, was notified in August 2022. Next, Plan Change 78 was partially withdrawn in October 2025 following an RMA change. Next, Plan Change 120 was notified for submissions, enabling 2 million dwellings. February 2026, this year, the Minister advised that he was considering a reduction of the minimum housing capacity from 2 million to 1.6 million. A couple of months later, April 2026, the minimum housing capacity was reduced further from 2 million to 1.4 million, and here we are today going out yet again with another change, conceivably from goodness knows whatever it is, 1.5 to 1.7 million. How do you think the public who is in this process is coping with that constant flux of change? Well, I can tell you they're not. They are totally confused. Councillor Lee referred to the analysis of the submissions thus far. 2-1 oppose it. And the people that are still hanging in now are wondering what on earth is next along this tortuous and constantly changing path. So it's quite false to say that they want it all over. No, they don't. They want certainty. This is their properties that are at stake, their livelihoods, the future of the Auckland region, the form of the Auckland region. So it's no incidental matter here. Councillor Lee's amendment provides that certainty, by very sensibly waiting to see what's in this planning bill. And who should we go to? We should go to the people who have been responsible for this shambolic process is a misnomer, this shambles that has gone on for 6 years.
Just get you to...
Yes, just summing up now, Mr. Chair, the responsible thing to do today, if we're really thinking of the people that are outside this little room here, is to provide that certainty, is to use that time in between to actually provide some education to people as to what's happening next, and to ratchet up some pressure on the people who are responsible. We hear a lot of talk, Mr. Chair, about a lot of bluff and bluster, I'd say, more than talk, about making Wellington listen to us.
Okay.
Well, they're not going to listen to us if we just keep bending at every single turn like we've done for the last 6 years. His amendment provides a way to provide certainty and to back the people
Thank
of
you,
Auckland.
Councillor Watson. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Just one thing that has been left out that needs speaking about, in my opinion. It is hugely complicated. The general public don't understand it. They just see the problems, they see what they're experiencing, and they equate it to what we're doing here today. 67% of respondents to the public consultation spoke about on-street parking. Yet that's not even part of what we're talking about here today, because it's been deemed as out of scope. And they're all I know people right now who are just sitting back there thinking about that issue, who are going to be struggling with it tonight. So I just think we should pause it and have another go at it. There's no such thing as a sympathy driver's license. You don't get issued a license because you failed your test 10 times in a row. Just because we've been here for a long time and spent a lot of money doesn't mean we've got it right, and we shouldn't put it through just because we've gone through a process. It's not right in the public's eyes. They've said that clearly, and so I support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferry.
Kia ora. I just want to focus on one very specific reason why I won't be supporting this, and that's in regard to the changes around the approach for flooding. A lot of us around this table have supported constituents and community groups who were impacted by the severe weather events in 2023, not just with flooding, but also with coastal inundation and landslides. And Plan Change 120, one of the main motivators for saying we didn't want to continue with Plan Change 78 and we needed to shift to this one, was to enable us as a city to address the very real risk to people's lives from, in particular, flooding, but also landslide and coastal inundation. And I can't support something that delays that further. We put out with the original Plan Change 120 as notified some stuff that does take effect now and would continue even through a pause, but it's not enough. And that's the new flooding approach, which I asked Phil to speak to, Phil Reid, earlier. And I want to get that in place for my community, for people who ask me, what is council doing to reduce risk? We're doing a bunch of things, but this is one of the really important ones, the really important signals that we can send to our community that we have learnt from 2023. And that we are taking it seriously, and so I can't support anything that would delay that further. I won't be supporting the amendment. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this amendment? Councillor.
I'm just seeking clarification. In terms of the application of standing orders today and the way and the timing in which we choose to speak to amendments or to the substantive motion or whatever that might be, could you just give us an indication of how you intend sharing it today so that we don't unwittingly transgress?
I think I've pointed that out a couple of times, but I said I would speak, Councillor Lee would speak, if, and I don't want to guess what happens, but if this amendment is lost, then we'll go to the next amendment. Everyone can speak to amendments and then the substantive, apart from the two movers of the amendments who their speaking turn for the substantive is the amendment. So that's our normal standing orders, yes.
I appreciate that, but sometimes we deviate from standing orders, and I just wanted
We
that
do.
clarification
Like
today.
right now, Councillor. No, just kidding. Thanks, Councillor Fitch. Yeah, I'll just say I'm not supporting this. We are saying we want the government to listen. This is the result of the government, rightly or wrongly, listening. So they changed the law for us to do this work, huge amount of work to get here. They announced yesterday that the planning bill changes come into effect in October. From October, it will be 39 months before we are destined to have a new plan, or at least put it out for notification. They've moved the time for the spatial plan to mid-2028. It's quite a long time. So other cities and other regions right across New Zealand implemented MDRS and this process, the MPSUD, in 2024. We are the last. And we are actually the only ones who don't have to put in the MDRS because the government listened to us. So love or hate the government, and many people will know views of mine, but they have listened, and we're now at a place where we have to make a decision, not just keep asking them to re-listen. Right. Division on this. Remember voting for it or against. Thank you.
Thank you, members. You're now going to vote through resolve on the amendment that has been on the screen. If you could, we will start the vote, and if you could indicate your preference. Thank you.
Mine hasn't come up either, so if you... Yeah. So... So...
Well, I can't. Yeah, because you can see who's not. So we'll just go a little bit old school, members. Duncan will just call out the names of people he doesn't have a vote for, and if you could indicate using your microphone.
Councillor Bartley,
no.
Mayor Brown.
No.
Councillor Burns. Councillor Foley. Councillor Foley. No. Councillor Henderson.
No.
Councillor Hills.
No.
Councillor Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Patterson-Hamlin. No. Councillor Sayers.
No.
Councillor Williamson.
For.
Member Blair.
No.
Member Wilson.
No. So that amendment has lost 15 votes to 7.
Thank you. Right, now we will move to Councillor Gillen's amendment. As this, the results are half and half. All right. Was lost 15 votes to 7. Thank you. Right, Councillor Gillen.
Gotta hold it long.
Can't get a photo of that.
If you just want to turn off your mic, Councillor Sayers, sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Right, Councillor Gillen, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, members. Let us not forget that today we are here Let us not forget that we are not here today discussing any of this by choice. We are here because of previous poor decisions from successive governments who thought it wise to force Auckland to take on unrealistic and unnecessary amounts of dwelling capacity without properly master planning the city and without ensuring that the infrastructure is in place before upzoning, and now with a tight time frame that is constraining our ability to properly plan. Over the last few years, Auckland's planning rules have been contorted and capacity figures of 2 million and 1.4 million have been magicked up, and Aucklanders are tired of it. Mr. Chair, since the last vote we had on this, I have continued to receive a huge amount of correspondence from North Shore constituents and from others across wider Auckland who are really worried. They just cannot understand why we are even contemplating any more intensification. They look at how their neighbourhoods, their communities that they cherish have changed in recent years due to the ad hoc and unexpected intensification delivered under Plan Change 78, but in particular with developers being permitted to breach the unitary plan on a weekly basis in height and bulk, creating buildings that were never anticipated or planned for. And they can't understand how we could even consider extending this further, especially when we don't have infrastructure in place. And I'm not just talking about pipes, but also about community infrastructure. There are no plans or funding in place for new local park acquisitions to replace lost gardens, nor are there sites identified for new schools or community centres or sports fields to support the added populations. They worry when they see developers doubling or tripling the population of small streets without on-site car parking. They worry when they see proposals like the one in front of us that crazily treats North Shore suburbs like they're part of the CBD due to the unfair and unneeded 10-kilometre circle. A circle that will enable 6-storey buildings on Lake Road between Takapuna and Hauraki Corner, and also the length of Oniwa Road, Glenfield Road, even to Veron's Corner, can you believe? Plus, at least 200 metres into every little side road off those roads. They worry about the destabilising effects of developers excavating slope sections. They worry about increased stormwater runoff from impervious surfaces and undercapacity tanks and the effect it will have on reserves and flooding houses downhill. And they worry about how emergency services will be able to get to their houses when roads are clogged with parked cars. They know better than us that the suburbs are going to struggle with the proposed levels of intensification, and they look to their representatives to do something about it. It's not much to ask to plan properly for our city's growth. And I hear the arguments for providing additional housing for the next generation. However, there is already ample capacity in the existing unitary plan to accommodate that, let alone in the extra that government requires. And of course, the real political solution for first home buyers is low or no interest or low or no deposit government loans, as has been done in the past, not what is in front of us today. But let's be clear, no matter where we land today and where the hearing panel lands, proposed capacity isn't just a theoretical number that we'll never reach, as some people claim. The real problem is that it is a capacity that is allowed to be built as of right, which not only means an increase in ad hoc out-of-place developments, but also means that council will need to retrofit infrastructure to meet the increased level of capacity, whether it is used or not, which of course will cost us all. Now, before I get to my amendment, I just want to address a claim that has been reported that the Chair's recommendation in front of us is some sort of compromise solution. It isn't that at all. What is currently in place across Auckland is by and large the original unitary plan. The government is forcing us to increase the dwelling capacity, but what is proposed today by the Chair goes well beyond what we need to do to meet that. Actually, Mr. Chair, what I am putting forward today in my amendment is the compromise solution, because it lies between the current unitary plan and the up to 1.7 million dwellings that are being proposed here. My amendment, and thank you to Councillor Burns for seconding it, is essentially to support the more sensible and realistic scenario A going out for consultation with only a few minor changes. Scenario A is to only do what we are legally required to do at this time, and there are several reasons why I'm putting this forward. Number one, as I mentioned, it meets the requirements of the government on where more intensity must happen, and it provides the capacity they want of 1.4 million dwellings. Tick. Number two, it responds to updated natural hazards risk information and proposes additional downzoning of residential properties at greatest risk of flooding. Tick. Number three, it minimises any potential rework as a result of the upcoming RMA changes. This is a really important point. Let us not forget that the unitary plan is going to be ripped up and rewritten, and new standardised zones are going to be applied across New Zealand. That is the time to be having a hard look at what needs to change and where, not now, in order to prevent rework and litigation. Tick. Number four, It still allows enough of a buffer for the hearing panel to make adjustments. It's a viable scenario, and if it wasn't, staff would never have devised it. Tick. Number 5, scenario A was the highest supported scenario from local boards. Hibiscus and Bays, Howick, Manurewa, Oraki, Papakura, Puketapapa, Rodney all supported scenario A. And Franklin, Kaipatiki, Mangere Otahu and Otara Papatoe all supported scenario A in part. Tick. Number 6, it is also consistent with the majority of the 10,500 submissions received on Plan Change 120, where the majority rejected any change to the unitary plan and wanted us to decline the plan change outright. The amendment adheres to this as much as legally possible. Tick. Now, scenario A does not have the local centres that were originally included and that many local boards opposed. It also doesn't include the frequent transport corridors, as those are not required in order to meet the government's requirements. It removes the 10-kilometre circle that we heard earlier concentrates the difference in intensification between the Chair's proposal, Amendment A, into the North Shore and Central Auckland. It reduces all walkable catchments to 6 storeys across Auckland, apart from the train stations named in law. It also allows the walkable catchment around Drury train station and amends the Mangawhao station walkable catchment as per the report. And it keeps the items noted in the other amendments section, including updating the flood modelling and restoring the height and relation boundary rule in the mixed urban zone. This is all set out in the table in the amendment, which for transparency has been taken from the report and amended. On the other important aspect that we're considering today, my amendment endorses the partial withdrawal of Plan Change 120. This means that anywhere not directly proposed to change will remain at the existing original unitary plan zoning and be largely exempt from the hearing panel. This is really important, as otherwise the hearing panel could use previous or future submissions to establish unexpected changes across Auckland. At the extreme end, they could rely on submissions to get us back up to the 2 million capacity. The partial withdrawal ensures that their deliberations will be limited to the areas that we accept today. And lastly, a note for our local boards. Thank you for all of your feedback. Most local boards requested a variety of changes to their areas, but very little has been accommodated into the report. This makes it difficult for councillors to incorporate them and why they don't appear in my amendment. So no matter where we land today, if you still want those changes, you will need to ensure you present them to the hearing panel. The same applies to those in the community who are fighting to retain the extent of the special character area overlays in order to preserve our city's treasured older buildings in the same way that many other cities have. That will also need to go to the hearing panel. So thank you, Mr. Chair. That is my amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Gunn. And just to be clear, the recommendations aren't my recommendations, they were staff, and they have not been changed, including the partial withdrawal.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, you have moved that.
Thank you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to this?
Questions?
Oh, sorry, questions. Are there any questions of Councillor Gillen or staff? No. If there are no questions, we can. Okay. Would you like to?
I have a question.
Yes, Councillor Fletcher.
Councillor Gillen, can you tell me that if we were to go with your amendment, whether you believe that it will give greater flexibility to the independent hearings panel for being able to address some of the challenges that members of the community have raised with us?
Yeah, of course it will give flexibility to the hearings panel, and as I mentioned in my speech, scenario A was originally one of the options in front of us from staff. Staff advised A to D, and it accommodates that. So yeah, I'm confident that if this committee chose to go down the path of scenario A, that the hearing panel would still be able to make the changes it needs to in response to the submissions.
Thanks. Deputy Mayor, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, and Megan, I might have to get you to do this. The amendment by Councillors Gillen and Burns states that most local boards wanted option A, and that's one of the key drivers for this amendment. But in the staff presentation, they talked about a third. So I just want clarification around that.
Our view is that it is less than half wanted A, so it was around about a third. Yep.
Sorry, can I respond to that as well? The wording actually says it was the highest supported solely or jointly scenario from local boards, as per attachment A and B to the report.
Are there any Other questions? Cool. Okay. Now, would anyone like to speak to Councillor Gillen's amendment? Mayor Brown.
Okay, thanks. I've been doing a lot of listening today and haven't spoken yet, but I'd first of all like to thank the staff for the work they've done on the main proposal, which is a real compromise. 85% of Aucklanders aren't affected, and we are making the most out of where we've sunk a lot of cash into upgraded public transport, which seems in there unbelievably sensible. And all those areas in white which have been withdrawn include all the areas where there are trees and whatnot. So we've kind of listened to everybody. What I particularly dislike about this amendment is that it's limiting the public's saying. I've heard people saying, Councillor, he said, oh, public, we've got to listen to the public. This is exactly the opposite of that. I want to listen to the public. The majorities, like A and B, a lot of the people, A or A and B, all the iwi submissions were for B. So to cut out that whole thing there and say, no, we're not going to listen, and no evil, see no evil, hear no evil, is completely wrong. I think we've come up with a very good compromise. We've stopped shoving a whole lot of multi-storey buildings in very small shopping complexes in parts of Auckland where they weren't welcome. But where there's big shopping complexes, that's where people want to live. And so I think that the substantive one, once this is defeated, is worthwhile supporting. It's a very good result. And I particularly dislike things which limit the public's voice, which is what this would clamp down and do. Option A will still be discussed. It's still going to be one of the things we're discussing with them, A and B. And so if there's an overwhelming support for A, we will hear that. But in fact, the majority was B or A and B. And so why would we limit that? So I will be opposing this, but I will be supporting the substantive thing that we talked about some time ago, and we've almost forgotten, which does result in 85% being unaffected, and us getting a lot of value out of where we've sunk huge piles of cash in public transport. And it'll look like a city, not a big suburb. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do listen to the public. Well, we're supposed to, but I don't know if we have up till now. I did a report that said, and I say it again, 67 or 68% of people spoke about on-street parking. And in the council's report on the same submissions, 32% of all submissions were put into miscellaneous. And when I asked how did that happen, they said, well, because lots of people talked about on-street parking and that wasn't within scope. I just want to reiterate again that the public have been very clear to us in what they want, and that is that is well addressed by this resolution, so this amendment. So we'll be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Is there anyone else? Councillor Patterson-Hamlin.
Oh, am I still having some resolve issues? To say this isn't a compromise is quite inaccurate, and I just want to reiterate that we went out to local boards and iwi, and if you include the iwi and you put it in that table in terms of preferences of A or B, then B is massively outweighing A. We didn't just ask local boards, we asked iwi as well, and I want us to not forget that. In terms of not being a compromise, the other thing I want to point out is that the report shows loads of compromises that came from the feedback. In my ward, the compromise was that Blockhouse Bay was being treated as more of a centre than it actually is. Blockhouse Bay has some awesome shops in it, shout out Bay Cafe, shout out Shirley's, but it is not a centre, and it doesn't have the transport connections that it was being treated as. So the local board pointed that out, so it has been removed as a centre. Some of the best examples of compromise are in the North Shore ward around the Takapuna Metropolitan Centre, and changing things around the Smails Farm busway. There's a sort of direct examples, and there's another great example in Orake where one of the stations was maybe not as accessible as as it appeared initially, and so there was a compromise there with St John's Road or something like that. Arohamai, Desley, if I'm getting that information wrong. But there's been a lot of compromise to get us to this point, and so to suggest otherwise, I just completely disagree with that. I'm sorry, I won't be supporting this amendment.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you,